Climate change and variability is already a major determinant of socio-economic survival in the Horn of Africa. Efforts towards a comprehensive drought contingency plan for the Horn of Africa to reduce vulnerability include the recent historic meeting by Eastern Africa heads of summit held in Nairobi, Kenya on 9 September 2011. They promised to 1. Enhance the provision of timely and actionable early warning information by strengthening the IGAD Climate Prediction and Application Center, ICPAC. 2. Ensure efficient utilization of water resources in the region while promoting ecosystem rehabilitation and management with at least 10% forest cover and irrigated land in each country by 2017, while encouraging the shift from reliance on rain-fed agriculture to manage water and food security. They also noted the underutilized potential of rainwater harvesting and irrigation. 3. They promised to launch regional projects to address the underlying causes of vulnerability in drought-prone areas while reforming emergency humanitarian response to enhance resilience and long-term solutions by encouraging investment in agriculture within arid and semi-arid lands to enhance food security. 4. The leaders promised to support the Dry Land Initiative to promote integrated rural development and integrate drought risk reduction and climate change adaptation into planning and resource allocation while creating and supporting a multi-donor trust fund for drought and other disasters to be anchored in the IGAD Secretariat. Finally, they promised to develop the Horn of Africa Regional Disaster Resilience and Sustainability Strategy Framework. For Africa, issues of climate change have always sounded distant because the global conferences were mostly hosted away from the continent.
The fate of the Kyoto Protocol has for a number of years been an issue of heated debate amongst us, and rightly so. We in Africa recognize that the protocol needs to be updated so that it becomes more comprehensive in coverage and more effective in delivering results with regard to emission reductions. Consistent, of course, with the principles of common but differentiated responsibility. We welcome the readiness of the European Union plus Norway to renew their commitments. We believe this is the environmentally responsible thing to do. We are aware that this is a commitment in principle and has been conditioned on concessions from emerging nations.
It is impossible for communities and countries in the Horn of Africa to cope with the devastating impact without inputs and support from prominent or top policy makers, including heads of state. They are well placed to help ensure that adequate resources are allocated to those practically working to build climate resilience through transformative actions that reduce vulnerability while creating opportunities for transformation and enhancing adaptive capacity.
It has been a reactive policy. Just when disasters happen, could be climate related, could be any other, we have been only reacting. But now we should be proactive. As recently, most IGAD countries, including Kenya, Uganda, and others as well, in Ethiopia, they have reviewed their policies, making a shift from the reactive into proactive.
There are widespread efforts by policymakers to sensitize the public and even those who are expected to pay practical attention to activities linked to climate change.
There are countries that have made significant progress in integrating climate change in their policies, and the case that comes to mind is the Ethiopia's Green Growth Development Strategy. It's a very comprehensive national development strategy that also looks at low carbon production strategies, strategies that are resilient to climate change and sustainable development. So it addresses the impact of climate change, it promotes adaptation to climate change, but also adopts production strategies that have mitigation co-benefits. And this is really the approach, a very comprehensive national development and economy-wide approach that countries need to adopt.
Climate change is now a reality, and it is no longer a myth, because people used to talk like there is nothing like climate change. But now we are seeing the impacts of climate change, including droughts and floods. The impact of drought in agriculture is evident because it reduces the yields, it creates famine, and hunger and floods also have their own impacts.
The recurrence of extreme weather and climatic events in the region, including the ongoing drought, is progressively increasing in intensity and frequency on the account of climate change.
There are efforts designed to help solve what seems to have become an endless chain of humanitarian crises in Eastern Africa.
The issue of funding for climate change adaptation and mitigation is one of utmost importance to us as Africans. We are already severely affected by the climate change, as a result of which the lives of millions of Africans are at stake, as the extraordinary drought in the Horn of Africa shows.
Coping with devastating impacts of climate change requires increased understanding of various aspects of natural and man-made causes, although African contribution to the latter remains minimal.
We believe in IGAD region. There is abundant resources in terms of natural resources. There is enough water, there is land and soil. There is the trained human capability. So what is remaining is really to bring this all resource with the political commitment, making forward rather than going. And that was in fact, the resource was in fact certified.
However, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, human activities remain the main cause of the climate change characterized by global warming linked to greenhouse gases, aerosols, and land surface changes. Deforestation, desertification, and increased human settlements or urbanization raise atmospheric temperature because vegetative cover absorbing sun's radiation is lost.
That we cannot continue destroying our environment, then sit back, hoping that somehow it will replenish itself.
The increase in the greenhouse gases, which includes carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, has been traced back to the emergence of industrialization as a major cause of the ongoing global warming.
Member states' response mechanisms, the preparedness mechanisms, will have a cross-cutting regional response and preparedness mechanisms. And that's where we're talking about a coordination mechanism where all the four systems of drought management, of information, response, coordination, and policy issues are all tied together.
Africa's contribution to the increase in GHGs is very small when compared to more industrialized regions, but it is the most vulnerable, with deforestation rates that is 6 times the world's average, according to United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization. In short, climate change is threatening Africa's efforts towards sustainable development, as seen in Ethiopia, Kenya, and war-torn Somalia. Horn of Africa's major humanitarian crisis in the last 3 decades. 2011 humanitarian crisis linked to drought and armed conflicts, Kenya and Somalia. 2008 crisis caused by drought and conflicts in Somalia and Ethiopia, over 16 million people affected. 2006 crisis affected around 6 million people who needed humanitarian assistance. 1998 to 2000 crisis drought worsened by war between Ethiopia and Eritrea. 1991 to 1992 crisis caused by drought. 1984 to 1985 crisis linked to severe drought.
A large number of refugees, mainly from Somalia, have continued to cross borders into Kenya and Ethiopia, seeking to free themselves from the ravages of hunger and conflict.
Already, new initiatives supported by the Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research, CGIAR, Research Program on Climate Change, Agriculture and Food Security, CCAFS, is helping pastoralists and smallholder farmers cope with the emerging impacts of climate change, especially the severe drought.